Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody listening wherever and whenever this podcast may find you. Welcome to the Did You Know podcast, and I'm your host, Dustin. Today I'm going to be welcoming back to the podcast Gigi, previously on episode 47, describing his article on Bitcoin as a living organism. And today is just a great talk. And we had before the episode started, I was recording and we were kind of discussing a little bit about what we would talk about, and we kind of delved right in and then realized we haven't even done the introduction stuff. So this is going to be a little bit different. You're basically just going to roll right into the podcast, and then probably about 12 minutes in, I'll do the introduction, as I realized that we hadn't even done that part yet. So that's why it's a little bit out of order, but I think that discussion at the very beginning kind of really informs a little bit later on into the episode. So that's why I decided to include it and not cut it out or try to splice it in haphazardly. So just be aware of that. But before we go forward, I would like to say thank you to my sponsor, eToro, which is a trusted smart trading platform. They trade traditional assets as well as a variety of cryptocurrency assets. They offer innovative tools, and they do over $1 trillion in trading annually and have 11 million other traders on there in a sort of social network that you can interact with each other. It has some really cool features such as virtual trading, where you can practice strategy on real order books with fake money. And then you can also do copy trading. You can allocate a certain percentage of your portfolio to copy a successful trader's moves. So they win, you win, they get a little percentage of your profits. You get to copy someone who's maybe a little bit better than you. And, it's an all-around great thing. Go to didyouknowcrypto.com/eToro. That's eToro, and you'll get $50 for free to start trading Bitcoin today. Also, head over to supportmypodcast.com, and that is a way of helping out the podcast, but also saying thank you to you, because if you click on the listener-supported discounts, you can get access to the discounts that I have already on things like Trezor, Mushroom Coffee, Bitcoin tax software, all this other kind of stuff that's absolutely free to you, the listener. So if you're listening, you can go over there right now. No problem whatsoever. And lastly, I'd like to ask if you'd leave a iTunes review. If you could also, give it 5 stars if you think that's, warranted, which I think that it is. But most of all, I'd like to say thank you. You guys make all this possible. I really do appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to listen and support us and share. So thanks, and enjoy the show. Yeah, no, it's I've been trying to, because I think you and I mean, we could talk about this, or it's a subject I wanted to delve into if we had time as well, because his concept of not being able to own Bitcoin. Yeah, I really, that you occult the knowledge is probably my favorite description of Bitcoin that's out there, and I think that's the closest to the truth that we've been able to get to. But yeah, basically the topics are going to be talking about the epiphany that you had, obviously, essentially those pictures, and then the concept of the Bitcoin religion as well, and then if we have time, the not owning your Bitcoin and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, sure. I think we will have time, and I'm happy to talk about pretty much everything. I am the only thing I want to, like, the only caveat to that is I had this weird experience, and I don't have the right vocabulary yet to talk about everything. I tried to talk about it with a couple of people with varying success. So some of it is just it's not that it's deeply personal. That's not it. It's just very
indescribable.
This thing happened to me, and I simply lack the vocabulary, and I can only talk about it with religious language in a way, even though I'm not a religious person at all. I view myself as a scientist, and I have been a scientific researcher for a couple of years, and I'm first and foremost a skeptic. And so it's really weird that this happened to me now, and just my brain went into a different mode, and it's kind of like you know, you can research sex all you want, but if you had sex once and it was like a life-changing sexual experience, it does something to you in a way, and then it's very hard to view sex as just a reproductive thing that we do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And similarly, I had what felt like profound insights, but from the outside, it obviously looked like I went crazy, and maybe I went crazy. You know, like it's not
Well,
for
I
me
think
to tell.
yeah, and I think that most religious experiences are like that, right?
Yeah,
Where from internally there's this profound experience that's hard to, and I think a lot of, if you read a lot of religious writings from whether it was the, you know, the Buddha or like Saint Therese, where they had these massively important, that it took them a very long time to be able to put into words, and a lot of them even admitted that they just can't describe the experience, just because there aren't the words in the vocabulary of language to fully describe it. So it's really lacking in terms of your ability to convey that information, because of a lot of it's so personal, given your context, your history, and just, you know, feelings. You can say, well, I love this person, right? But that doesn't capture
yeah,
the
exactly.
the depth of that
I
experience.
mean, it's the old philosophical problem that words are just pointers to experiences in a way. Like it's the word itself is not the thing, you know. Like the if you have a picture of a pipe, this is not a pipe,
Yeah.
and it's similar to like everything we do. Like if you do any kind of extreme sport, or if you do surfing for example, you can talk about surfing all you want. If you never surfed, you don't know really what it is and how it feels like. And it's the same for any experience really. And if like the more out there the experience is, the more troubling it is to just talk about it. But um I talked to Brandon Quidham about this, and this was
Okay.
very very helpful. Like he's the mushroom guy, you know him from
Yeah.
Bitcoin
Yeah.
as a living organism mycelial network,
Hmm. Absolutely.
and
I agree 100%.
he is very like he's very well read in terms of um, psychedelic and also religious experiences, and I kind of knew that, so I contacted him and tried to talk with him about it, and that was very helpful because he has a way better vocabulary, and he pointed me to a book which I got, and I've read the first 30 pages or so of it. It's a very weird, very I hate this word, but I'll use it anyway. It's a very spiritual book, and it was written by someone who had an enlightenment experience and tried to put it into words. And I swear to God, the first 10 or 15 pages, they almost one to one match my very chaotic notes that I took while I had this weird
Wow.
experience in a way. You know how stuff like it's a process that you can't stop. Like it has to unfold on its own. Like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. You already know that a caterpillar will be a butterfly, but there is no caterpillarness that you have to strip away. You just have to wait for the process to unfold, and that's how that might be a good segue to bring it back to Bitcoin, because that was the trigger for me that I realized that Bitcoin, in essence, is an idea, and it's currently embodied in the Bitcoin network. And the basic idea of it is that it's unstoppable and it's unkillable. I mean, Satoshi spoke about this plenty of times, that the basic problem of digital currencies was always that you were able to kill them, that you were able to stop them. And I'm obviously using biological language now, that you kill something, and if something is really decentralized, like that's the technical language, then it's very very hard to kill. And that's basically the main idea of Bitcoin, that you build a system that let me try to put this right. So I believe that Bitcoin is an idea first and foremost, and I believe that it is the right idea. Like it got the main points right. And so what is this idea? I think that economically speaking, the idea was to build a system which produces absolute scarcity, and it does not discriminate, so it's completely open, and it's also neutral and as fair as it can be. And most importantly, that it also cannot be undermined, it can't be changed. And if you want to translate this to technical terms, what Satoshi obviously did by building the system, like technically speaking, the idea was to build a system which has no head and thus is unstoppable. It just can't be stopped because there is no single head to cut off. And I believe that in a way, Bitcoin does it in the same way how life on Earth does it, because the idea is embedded in the entity itself. It's just like biology does it with DNA, you know, like the code of life is embedded in every single living cell. And in a similar way, the code of Bitcoin and also the consensus code. Like if I say idea, think of idea in quotes. Obviously, the idea of Bitcoin itself is embedded in the code. So the idea is kind of equal to the code. And also the idea is equal to the consensus rules, because this is the most important part of the network in a way. I mean, it's debatable what is the most important part of Bitcoin, but it is a very important part. And one of the neat side effects of the system is that it is pure information. And that was part of my insight, that like the idea of Bitcoin is so powerful, it will be able to transcend everything. And I feel like this loops back also to what Max Hillebrand and the others are saying about the you can't really own Bitcoin stuff, because everything is pure information. You can't really own information. But what I think is really, really neat, and I think it's just so hilarious, that if you get down to it metaphysically, you really can't own Bitcoin. You just own a number. I think that's true. I mean, and you can debate what is owning stuff and blah blah blah. But in essence, you know a number that no one else knows, and that's how you quote unquote own Bitcoin. So in essence, you can't really possess Bitcoin. But what's obvious to me is that people can be possessed by Bitcoin, because it's such a powerful idea that I mean, I'm the prime example, or one of the prime examples. I'm sure there are people that are way more obsessed than I am, but I am quite obsessed with Bitcoin, and that I'm having a hard time thinking of something else. And so it's funny how you can't really possess Bitcoin, but Bitcoin can possess you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, any successful idea is like a virus, right? It propagates and spreads, and then continues to find new hosts as it continues along. And if it's an unsuccessful idea, it just kind of dies in the original host.
Yeah, and I think that, as I said, like Bitcoin first and foremost is an idea, and I think it's the most powerful idea that we have right now in a way, and that's how I relate it to religions, because religions are very powerful ideas as well, and in a way, Bitcoin is such a powerful idea. It can be used as the base axiom of a society in a way, like it's a source of truth. You know, it's this beacon of truth that you can't really argue with it. If you believe in the physics that we know, you can't really argue with Bitcoin, because to change or to say what is embedded in the Bitcoin blockchain is not true is more or less not believing in the current physics that we know. It's just the way the whole system is set up, but also it's not. And that's where I triggered a lot of people, I think. You kind of have to believe in Bitcoin as well, because it's not a provable mathematical construct. It's not I can't prove to you that Bitcoin is secure, for example. And I can't prove to you that what is in the blockchain is actually the truth and it's actually what happened. It's probabilistically true, and it's a messy system, just like biology is. It's very unlikely that it's untrue, you know. That's just how the whole system works. And I think all those kind of things that it possesses you, and it's such a grand idea that spreads from brain to brain in a way also. it has just so many parallels to religions, and I didn't even talk about the obvious parallels that we have a create a god that disappeared, and we have a white paper which is scripture, and we have rituals which is proof of keys and running a node and stacking sets, and we have religious fanatics, and we have freedom fighters that are willing to die for the idea and stuff like that. So just on a metaphysical, philosophical level, I think it is powerful enough to become its own religion. And I'm saying all of this with a grain of salt, but I think that in the next 10 years, the amount of people that will be religious about Bitcoin, or that are religious about Bitcoin, will simply rise. And then it depends on your definition of a religion. I mean, obviously Christianity and Judaism and the big religions that we know, the world religions, are religions. But you also have Scientology, and you also have the Jedi Knights, So it kind of depends on where you want to draw the line, what is a religion for you and what not.
Well, actually, I just if you check your Twitter DMs, I just sent you a picture of a. So I made up this graphic that I was trying to make, and I got some work to do on the hats because the embroidery wasn't exactly how I liked it from the printer, but that was one of the ones that they sent, and I agree 100% in this concept of it being a religion. Well, actually, here I just realized we haven't even kind of really started the show yet here. So let me do the introduction here real quick, and then we can jump into it here. I'd like to welcome Gigi, a coder, author, creative thinker, and creator of 21lessons.com and bitcoin-resources.com. Gigi, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Dustin. Nice to be here.
And before we get into anything, I heard that you are actually going to be having a baby soon, so congratulations.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's exciting times.
And we were, for those that are listening, we kind of had a kind of an extensive conversation before we started here, but you were talking about the experience that you had, and we'll get into that in just a second. But I think that once your child comes into this world, you're going to have kind of another similar experience in a way that it's almost indescribable once you have a child, and just kind of how that you can have the words of like, I love this child and everything like that, but it's a very to me it was a very weird experience, to say the least, because at first I was a bit numb because I didn't know how to explain it. And then once I started it's very similar to what you were saying, how your experience was you kind of didn't have the words, and then over time you were able to kind of codify that experience, those feelings into words.
I think it's fitting also because everyone who had a child is saying in a way the same thing. And if you didn't have a child yet, then you just have to believe that it's
exactly.
that it's that thing that everyone is talking about, but you have no idea what everyone is talking about. And I guess in a couple of months I will look back and I will be okay, that's what everyone talked about.
Yeah, no, it's really excited and happy for you, because it is it's a very, very cool experience, and it's unlike spousal love and things like that. It's very primal, and which I think is not that spousal love is not as well, but it's different. There's different types of loves and depths and meanings of that. But on a recent episode of the Bitcoin Echo Chamber, you talked about this kind of, for lack of a better terms, kind of this epiphany or religious experience that you had at the it was a Honey Badger conference, correct?
Yes, exactly. And I take everything I say about the religious stuff with a huge grain of salt, because first of all, I'm not religious, and but second of all, I kind of understand. Well, I'm even having a hard time saying now that I'm not religious, but I don't want to trigger all the atheists, and I also don't want to trigger all the religious people. But something happened to me in Riga, and I had it feels to me like I gained I gained a deeper level of understanding in regards to Bitcoin, but also in regards to other things. And I can only describe it as a religious experience. It was really weird. And yeah, I can't really say what triggered it, but what happened to me actually was that I was so excited that um, like it felt to me like I had one epiphany after the other, and my brain just refused to go to sleep. So I was awake for at least 4 nights, and they actually had to put me to sleep in the hospital because my brain just would refuse to shut down. So yeah, that was a very weird experience.
So could you, and well, I would say that you you're saying that you're not religious, and you did kind of walk that back a bit, because I was going to say that, having an experience like this, having an obsession with Bitcoin, as you describe it, is very much the same sort of experience that people have traditional in traditional religions. And I think that a lot of people, because in my interview with, we can kind of maybe move back to that experience that you had, or not maybe, but I want to move back to that to describe it. But in my interview with Nick Carter, he kind of, or I shouldn't say kind of, he pushed back against the idea of even framing Bitcoin using religious
Mm-hmm.
language. So you and I agree that it not only exhibits the signs of a religion, it's binding, common belief. It
Mm-hmm.
has rituals, it has holidays, um, which I wrote about in an article linked to. But I think it's already achieved that status of a religion, or at very
Mm-hmm.
least a cult, which is kind of the preamble to a religion.
Yeah.
So why do you think that there is resistance to this idea within Bitcoiner circles? Do you think it's that there's that they perhaps haven't come to this realization yet, that they're just looking at it in purely economic terms, of
Um,
just being a tool?
Partly maybe. I think Nick Carter is an insanely smart guy, and I'm sure he has his reasons to say that. And I'm not necessarily disagreeing with him because I think religion it's such a loaded term and it has so much baggage. We don't necessarily want to associate Bitcoin with religion and walk around and say like, "Hey, join this religion. It's so cool." So I think it would be just bad marketing in a way, and I think also um, we have to be careful how to describe Bitcoin and how to pitch Bitcoin to no coiners and stuff like that. And mind you, when I talk to regular people about Bitcoin, I'm not using religious language. I'm not even using biological language. All of that is very far out there, and I'm currently dancing on the edge of my understanding of what this thing is. And I think that religion fits. And for me, it's simply what is the right level of analysis. And you can do this for all kinds of things. I mean, you can also ask yourself, what is the right level of analysis for humans? Because you can go downwards and you can say that we are just our parts, like our constituents, and you can say that we are just organs in a meat bag, and we can also say that we are like our microbiome, for example. There are so many organisms living in us and on us. Without those organisms, we wouldn't be able to function. You could also say that we're just our cells, and we could also say that we're just our DNA, and you can, I just went downwards with the level of analysis, but you can also go upwards and you can say we are our family and we are our friends, because you're basically the combination of the 5 people closest to you. And you can also say that we organize ourselves in groups and in clans and in companies and other organized groups. And you can have a level of analysis which is even bigger than that, and you can view people as just tiny dots on a map, and just talk about very large organizations or nation states or whole populations of continents. And all of that is kind of useful. So the question to me is, what is the right level of analysis in Bitcoin? And you can say it's just zeros and ones. And you can also say it's just code. And you can also say it's just software, it's just technology. All of that is kind of true. But you can go further. And I made all these steps in a way, because you can also say it's fintech, and we have a lot of fintech people that are stuck in this fintech circle. And you can say it's just finance, it's a financial instrument, and you can use it to send value around, but it's nothing more. I think Beautyon has this viewpoint pretty much down. But you can go a step further and say it's money. And you can go a step even further and say it's sound money. It's the soundest money we ever had. So it's a monetary revolution. But you can also say that it's a social movement and it's a revolution, and it's similar to other big social movements. And I compared it to the gay pride movement, for example. I think there are some comparisons there as well, because we have closet Bitcoiners, and we had closet gay people, and we still have closet gay people in the world. But the next step for me would be that it's an infectious idea. It's like it can be used as an axiom to view the world, and that's where religion comes in. And I think the most powerful, like a lot of people say that it's a meme, and to me the most powerful memes in the world are religions. And I think that in on the level of analysis level, Bitcoin is such a grandiose, huge, ingenious idea, and it's so infectious that in a couple of years it would make sense to talk about Bitcoin as a religion. And I think religious language really works, just like biological language and biological level of analysis really works.
To kind of delve deeper into this, I mean, I agree that it isn't probably good marketing for a percentage of the population, but I'm not actually an atheist in the least, so I have different issues with that term, because Bitcoin wouldn't be what I describe as my faith. But I do recognize that it is exhibiting these signs. I think it's important to have these discussions, because we can't pretend it's not becoming something that it's not. And I think that you say that it's a loaded term, because, well, the term religion, to look at what it means, the Max Lynn Stackhouse, who was a writer and I believe a preacher in the United Church of Christ, if I remember correctly, they defined religion as a comprehensive worldview or metaphysical moral vision that is accepted as binding because it is held to be in itself basically true, and just even if all of its dimensions of it cannot be fully confirmed or refuted. And I think that would fit Bitcoin,
Yeah.
because the term religion doesn't have to necessarily mean that you go to certain places on certain days, that you have certain opinions of other people. Although, even just using the term no coiner or shit coiner, it is a way of identifying the other outside of your own belief system. In Sanskrit, the word dharma, which is kind of often associated with the word religion, although that's not 100% accurate. It also has the meaning of law. In Hebrew, they don't have a concept of religion within kind of Judaism, in the same way that they do in our Western sense. But a central tenet of, I think it's pronounced halakha, is translated as law, which is, the law in Judaism is a central part of their belief system. While it's not necessarily the same thing, I think, that we're talking about in Bitcoin, I think it is very parallel to what we're talking about, where it's almost a term of law as a matter of faith. Because you see, within Bitcoin, we talked about the holidays and the rituals, like running your own full node as your way to like verify the objective truth within that religion, where you have specific holidays. We have Bitcoin Pizza Day. We even have certain days, although I don't think it's really as big as the other ones, where we kind of talk about the Hal Finney tweet or anything like that, where the fork of Bitcoin was kind of trying to be celebrated as a day, although I didn't think it took off as much as the others. But I think there's a lot of parallels between there, and I don't think that we can ignore that.
Yeah, I think so too. And there are more and more days and rituals coming. I mean, we have proof of keys, for example, which kind of is a ritual and a holiday as well. Like it's one day of the year where everyone, proves that they have ownership of their keys and just move stuff from the exchanges. And we have new rituals popping up all the time. I mean, stacking sats in a way is also a ritual. And for a while, Wasabi Wednesday was really big. Like every Wednesday, just provide liquidity to Wasabi. And so I think it's very fitting, like you say. And what was part of my insight. I'm still trying to figure out what happened and what I should really believe and what is the best vocabulary. But
well, I'm sorry to butt in,
yeah,
but
no,
I mean, you kind of described I just kind of want to make sure that we kind of walk it all the way through of what happened. So you were at the conference, and like you said, you had this experience, and you were up for 4 days because your mind
Yeah,
wouldn't shut
pretty
off.
much.
So what was
Exactly.
kind of the genesis of those days as you were trying to figure this out? What was happening kind of day by day? You talked about that you were writing down, basically kind of drew out, and your experience is kind of codified in these
Mhm.
drawings that you were doing on, I don't know if it was paper or napkins, but
Yeah, it was
if you could
paper. I
kind of
had
just
notebooks with me.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah, if you could kind of describe the kind of the process over those days of how you were, up until this point, how
Hmm.
that experience kind of revealed itself.
Um, yeah, that's a really good question. I'm not sure if I have good answers. I basically I didn't sleep too much in the first night because I was just out and about with everyone, and I didn't want to miss the conference, so I got up early again. So I slept for maybe 3.5, 4 hours, something like that. And in the second night, I actually wanted to do the very responsible thing, and I got home at midnight and I wanted to sleep, but for some reason just my mind was very awake and I couldn't put myself to sleep. And so I basically lay in bed for the whole night, and I didn't really sleep. Maybe I had some micro sleeps, I don't know, but I don't know how this works. But I had a couple of insights, and um I I wrote them down whenever I had them. So I kind of have proof that I didn't really sleep. And the same thing happened in the next night. And then things got really out of hand. I was all over the place. I think it was basically because I didn't sleep. And I think your brain shifts in a very different mode if it's very sleep deprived. And I basically was more and more behaving like an insane person, and I was just very unorganized and very all over the place. And some people that were with me, they obviously noticed that, and I I flew back from Riga, and I met one of my best friends, and I crashed on his couch and wanted to go home after that. But I actually had to crash on his couch for 2 nights because I still couldn't really sleep, and I still had these kind of weird insights slash epiphanies. And I can't really put it into words yet, but I basically my main insight was um, I send you a picture, right? And this picture is like a circle which consists of multiple circles on the outside. So maybe
Yeah,
you can.
you sent that to me, and I'll and if anybody goes to the show notes, which would be at diginocrypto.com/ep 57, I'll have those pictures up there for anybody. But sorry to butt in there, but just want to let
No,
everybody know.
no, no. That's perfect. Just if you look at this picture, I view Bitcoin and understanding Bitcoin as this picture, basically. And you can end up in those small circles, and you can view Bitcoin as just the idea, and then you might be very interested in the white paper and understanding the white paper. The next circle would be you can view Bitcoin just as code, and if you're a programmer, you might get stuck in this circle, and you can move on to the next circle, and you can understand it as technology and as also as just software that you run. And some people, I think, are stuck in that circle as well. And the next one would be like between the technology and finance is the fintech circle. There's some people stuck in there as well. There's some people just stuck in the finance circle, and you go from technology to fintech to tech. Sorry, you go from technology to fintech to finance, from finance to finance and monetary phenomena, to monetary phenomena, monetary revolution, sound money. And there are some people that really try to analyze Bitcoin as its own thing. So I think understanding Bitcoin as a biological organism or something that has gravity, like the Bitcoin explainers, they are in their own circle as well. And the next steps, like the next steps of understanding Bitcoin, or the next circles where I could end up with. That's how I pictured it in my mind. Like I'm just trying to make sense what was in my mind those couple of days. The next couple of steps are kind of huge steps to to viewing it as something that is a mind virus and a meme, and then you're back at the idea stage again. So it, in a way, what I wrote under this drawing the first time it popped into my head was like the rabbit hole is circular, and it's possible to go like one way around it if you're not stuck in one of those smaller circles. And then the whole idea of Bitcoin is circular. And I think what triggered the this understanding that I had, and what also triggered this image, was when I talked to Hes McCook. He has a very deep understanding of Bitcoin, and I view him as the Bitcoin Pope, because he has such an aura to him, and he uses religious language all the time, and he does it in a like half jokingly way, but he's also kind of serious about it, like tithing in Bitcoin. Like you have to stack sats every day, and you have to dollar cost average every day, and there is just no way, like selling is a sin and stuff like that. And talking to him, I kind of realized that the last step is elevating Bitcoin from a cult status, where we obviously are. I mean, maximalism is a cult, and we have dietary restrictions where most maximalists, or many maximalists, just eat meat and drink water in a way. And as you said, we have a lot of specialized language to separate us from them, and you have the toxic maximalists, and you have no coiners and pre-coiners and shit coiners and stuff like that. And I think that the next step from the cult is going in the religious direction. And as I said before, I think religions are the biggest memes in the world. Like they're the biggest, most important and most powerful mind viruses. And I think Bitcoin in a similar way is a mind virus. But if you go this step, you're basically back at the idea level. And my insight was that, again, Bitcoin is an idea first and foremost. And I'm pretty convinced that the idea is right. And I think we can also make parallels to religions in that way, because there are some ideas in this world, like there are some things where the basic idea is right. For example, the sovereignty of the individual. I think the West got this right. And also in the legal system, the presumption of innocence. I think again, the West and the legal system in the West got this right. If you want to use religious language, you could say that the divinity of every soul, like Christianity got this right, that every person has a divine soul. It has a divine part. And I just know the German saying, like, die Würde des Menschen ist unantastbar. Like you no matter what someone did, he still has this divine part in him. So you have to treat them with respect, even if they are a mass murderer. And I think Bitcoin got the basic idea right as well. And the basic idea is that you have absolute scarcity, so no one can produce more of it. Absolute openness, so everyone can participate. Absolute transparency, so everyone can validate the design and the supply as well. And it's also, I would say, absolutely set in stone, so you can't change the soul, the essence of Bitcoin. And all of that is very religious to me in the way that there are obvious parallels to the greatest ideas of the world. I don't know. What do you say?
So this kind of harkens back a bit to the previous interview that we did where you were talking about Bitcoin as an organism, because I think that there's a lot of parallels between organisms and religions. In Catholicism, the church itself is referred to as the body of Christ, and evolutionary biologists have described religion as an evolutionary organism. It stays alive through the practices of its adherents. It survives, it multiplies, or dies if the intake is not enough to sustain it. And I think that this idea of the emergence of Bitcoin as a religion is a natural outgrowth of where you talk about Bitcoin as an organism, where it pays people to keep it alive, or this is a natural outgrowth of it, where it is creating faith or a religion, however you want to describe it, as a better meme for it to survive than just mere monetary incentive.
Yeah, and
Where
I think you hit the point the point on the head, like you hit the nail on the head there, because I believe that obviously Bitcoin is so powerful because of monetary incentives, like obviously, and all the economists talk about that. And I think, Seyfedin Ammous could talk about it for 10 hours straight, why Bitcoin works and why it's so powerful and why it captures people's minds and imagination and so on and so forth. But I believe that we have a certain subset of people, even if Bitcoin, even if we would have a catastrophic failure and it would go to zero, even though I think it's pretty much impossible, but even if we would have that, they would not give up this idea. That's what I realized. In a way, it's way more powerful than I thought, because even if it would, even let's say we break the cryptography, let's say that everyone can buy a quantum computer and we break the cryptography, and let's say that we would have to start from scratch, so to speak, and do it in a very messy way. I think there would be enough people to just rebuild something new out of the ashes. And that's like, from an economic viewpoint, that's kind of weird and almost irrational. Or with pure economic thinking, I'm not sure if you can explain that.
no, I don't think that you can. And this has been something I've been trying to work on for a while. So at first I was trying to figure out, it's part of this journey of figuring out what is Bitcoin. And it's funny because the longer that I spend and the more often that I think I know what it is, the more often I realize I don't know what it is. And I was trying to figure out, is there, at first I was going, okay, what are the first principles of Bitcoin? But that was a bad term because first principles have a very specific definition. So I think maybe foundational principles of it. And this is still a very rough draft in my mind, and a little bit on paper, so to speak, of how I've tried to work my way through it. And I'll probably come to a lot different uh, conclusions perhaps by the time that I'm done with it. But so, looking at it as decentralization and money, I think are subsets of sub principles of the main principle of Bitcoin, which you already talked about, that sovereignty as a Western concept was something that we got right as the individual, and that the sovereignty as a principle, as a mind virus in itself, is something that creates different tools to achieve its end. And Bitcoin is one of these tools, or probably one of the greatest tools that it has created, in that Bitcoin's sole goal, as far as for its users, or I should say its effect, is individual sovereignty. And that in that way it kind of almost preceded Bitcoin, and that to achieve that goal in Bitcoin it needed a subset of principles. I would say that money would be one of those principles and uses, although that's not obviously the only aspect of Bitcoin. And decentralization was necessary for it to be, because if it was centralized, it would not be able to achieve sovereignty. So it's been something I've been trying to kick around in my head of the because I think it's important, and this also falls into the religious aspect of it as well. I think that it's important that we have kind of a agreed upon set of principles of what Bitcoin is. It's because in that way it's something that can be defended versus just mere economic utility as a
Yeah.
means and end unto itself. Whereas these principles, these tenets of a religion, or the religious aspect of it is an outgrowth of Bitcoin and of this principle of sovereignty, to be able to secure it, to kind of bind people's minds all together in a common goal, so that when there's attacks from outside, or that there's moves from inside to make it to make it more wishy-washy, to make it to try to water it down from the inside, that there's these very, very energetic and very strong reactions to the contrary to stop that from happening.
Yeah, I think I have a couple of things to say about that, because I think with moral frameworks and also with religious text, I think it always was behavior first and then rules second. And with Bitcoin, it's the same thing in a way. What I mean by that is, take the Ten Commandments for example. People obviously behaved in a certain way before the Ten Commandments were a thing, and I think people just observed how good families, good societies, good people behaved, and they wrote the rules after the fact. You know what I mean? It's just you observe what works and then you write it down. And I think trying to do the same thing, it's obviously very messy with humans. I mean, we now have the code of the human rights and other things, and we have some certain moral standards, and we have the golden rule, and we have stuff like that. But still, it's very messy. What's the right thing to do and whatnot? It's a very messy concept, and yeah, describing that and setting up rules for a behavioral system in a way is, I would say, almost impossible. It's really hard to do. And then in a similar vein, in Bitcoin, we kind of have this, like, there is no specification. You know, the Bitcoin network embodies the spirit of Bitcoin, to use religious language in a way. And I think describing it and trying to do a 10 commandments of Bitcoin in a specification and in a what is Bitcoin sense, it just doesn't work. And it can never work because, as you said, Bitcoin is a completely decentralized system. So there is no authority that could say, okay, and this is now the Bitcoin system. And that's also, a lot of people have hangups with understanding that. That's why a lot of people focus on the white paper, for example. But the white paper doesn't matter. And that's also why I think that Bitcoin, again, first and foremost, it's an idea. And whatever currently embodies this idea best is Bitcoin. And currently that's the Bitcoin network and the Bitcoin core client and the stuff that everyone uses and the stuff that is used as a host for this idea. If a new, better other client would be written and it would do what Bitcoin does in a more efficient, more provable, better way, or even if, for example, Bitcoin transcends the internet and we would have something else than the internet, which is better and faster and more resilient, then Bitcoin obviously would use that. And I think it wouldn't change the soul of Bitcoin. It wouldn't change the essence. It would just use another, like, the idea itself would use another host, and that's how I see it. And it's all of it is very messy, but messiness is inherent in decentralization, and that's also why I think that viewing it as a form of life is so very helpful, because life itself is very messy as well, because life itself is decentralized. I don't know. I hope everything I say kind of makes sense.
No, it does. So like I said, it was a very rough concept that I was moving around, and it was not meant to be some sort of it 10 commandments in a way where it was literally set in stone, right? As in the way that when Moses wrote them on the tablets, as this is, for time immemorial, and it was solidified. That's kind of almost using BSV language in a way, right?
Yeah,
Where
exactly.
And it was more of a, I don't know, like, it's very hard for me to describe as well, because I haven't been able to quite figure it out as a way of describing, because once Bitcoin was released, it's an idea, and it is a idea that once it was released started to evolve in and of itself, and to change, to make itself more resilient, to increase its survival, and will continue to change over time. So these certain principles that I would have, that I kind of mentioned earlier, may end up, evolving as well over time, and these kind of tenets of the religion that it's creating around itself for survival will, because at the end of the day, which, sorry, I hate using that term, the organism is going to want to preference survival over over anything else, and that's
Yeah.
really what any organism does. What through reproduction, through sexual selection of traits, and any other thing that it does. Humans did that with we with our increasing brain capacity. We had to ingest more and more nutrients and better quality nutrients, and have our children were actually born earlier than we are actually ready to come out, just
Hmm.
because of our brain size. But that was the trait that led to the survival of the human species, and I think that Bitcoin operates in that way, to a point as well, where it is increasing its collective intelligence, as kind of this it's hard to describe it, because we kind of did that in the last episode of trying to describe what kind of organism it
Yeah.
is, right? Or it's almost a collective intelligence, or swarm intelligence,
Yeah.
kind of like
Yeah.
a bunch of birds, where it's individuals running, nodes and operating on the network, who are
Hmm.
providing their own collective intelligence, and kind of that whole swarm is moving this way and that, as it reacts to different things, and we see that as it reacts to, throughout its history, price dumps and price pumps, more
Exactly.
individuals, the public becoming more aware of it, the proliferation of these just shit coins, and random projects out there, especially in 2017, when we saw that, where Bitcoin has shifted and has become, and Bitcoiners have become more, I would say, more dogmatic, and much more kind of line in the sand, where earlier on, while a lot of people weren't fans of Litecoin or Dogecoin, it was kind of a joke almost, in a way. Coinye, all these different coins that had come out,
Yeah.
and where in 2017 it was, started to become seen as more of an existential threat of taking away the momentum of Bitcoin, where the dogmatism of individuals, and kind of calling out these projects as being kind of bunk, it seemed to kind of rise out of it, where now you see within Bitcoiners the more, and you could say it's for worse or whatever. It's kind of individual choice of how you want to describe it, but the kind of the attack dogs and white blood cell count,
Yeah.
folks have kind of started to rise more to the top, as these projects have come out to threaten the momentum of this organism.
Yeah, and I think it all loops back to, uh, again, as I said, first and foremost, Bitcoin is an idea, and I think the idea is to separate money from state. I mean, there are a bunch of ideas embedded in Bitcoin, but as you said, the immune response to all the shit coins and everything that was going on, all the ICOs in 2017, it was a very strong immune response, and that's also where I would say, as you also said, a lot of the dogmatism and a lot of the toxic maximalism was born. But I think it was a necessary response, and you can view it as, on a level of analysis of people. People stepped in and did what is in their self-interest, because obviously every Bitcoiner wants Bitcoin to pump, but it's also in their interest of fulfilling this idea of separating money and state. And this again loops back to a kind of a self-interest. If you think that Keynesianism is just insane, and fractional reserve banking and all of that is insane, and you want to return to a sound money standard so that a lot of the ills of the world are fixed, then you have to kind of rise up and speak up and tell every shitcoiner that he's just, yeah, he's wrong on this. We have one chance to fix money, and Bitcoin is it. And I think a lot of people came to this realization and started to speak up. But as you obviously said as well, and I think the level of analysis of Bitcoin as a living organism works so insanely well, because you can flip the perspective and you can view it from the Bitcoin point of view. And if you view Bitcoin as a living entity, as its own thing, it obviously it pays the maximalists to speak up for it and to protect it. And you have as you said, the white blood cells that kick in and trigger this immune response. And I think it works, like all this biological language works so insanely well, because there is a close line between a strong immune response a like it's a thin line between a strong immune response and an autoimmune disease. And I think what we saw in 2018, after the fallout of 2017, we had a lot of infighting, and a lot of battles were fought where I'm not even sure if it was a immune response or an autoimmune disease, because the white blood cells, they can go haywire and attack the organism itself as well.
Well, to kind of go back a bit to your realization or your experience, and you were talking about the different circles of kind of, I guess would it be best maybe describe them as the different kind of circles of understanding of Bitcoin?
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
So did you? I mean, I think that it's quite telling that you did this in a circle. Is that there's not really necessarily a hierarchy of understanding, but that maybe, and I might be describing this incorrectly, but maybe that these different circles of understanding that Bitcoiners have, that if you work your way through and you have all these, and you've come to the realizations within each circle, that's how you'll get a, not a full understanding of it, but a coming to a more, I guess, to go back to religious terms, almost in a way of enlightenment in the Buddhist sense, where
Yeah.
where it's something that a lot of, or maybe you don't even, it's a not an end goal perhaps, but a goal that, or that's not an end, it's not an end that you achieve and then you're done, but that you're constantly working your way through these circles constantly
Yeah,
to gain more
exactly.
and more understanding of it.
Exactly. I think it felt to me, and again, I take everything I say with a huge grain of salt. I mean, I kind of feel
With it,
comfortable talking about it because I just don't give a fuck, to be honest. Like,
well, that, and
it doesn't really matter.
well, we talk about
If
price discovery in Bitcoin, right? But I think that this is elements of understanding discovery, or
yeah,
of knowledge discovery within Bitcoin, where, you know, like you said, it's very rough and you still haven't quite figured it out yet, but it's a matter of a price discovery of understanding within Bitcoin as we're working our way through these concepts.
yeah. I think since you mentioned the circles a couple of times, I think just Bitcoin in general is circular, and I think Hasma Cook said that beautifully, that Bitcoin is nature. Like it's at the end of the day, it's rooted in energy, and so it is like a force of the universe. It is nature itself, and nature obviously is circular. You have circular rhythms, and with Bitcoin as well, you have circular adoption cycles. You have circular price discovery, which are the bubbles. But you have a lot of other circular phenomena. For example, the whole security mechanism in Bitcoin is circular. Like mining becomes profitable, more miners start to mine again, security goes up, then the worth of the token goes up, and so we begin again. So it becomes more profitable, and so on. And there are dozens of these kind of circular phenomena in Bitcoin, and I intend to write about it as soon as I can. But I have so many other things to do before that it will probably take half a year before I can really articulate what I mean, and do all the drawings properly, and just articulate everything properly. So I'm basically using using this podcast here to think out loud and trying to work on my articulation. But the levels of understanding, I think it's not a hierarchy, and I also think it's impossible to understand Bitcoin completely. I believe that, like, I started to believe that already 1.5 years ago or so. It dawned on me that understanding Bitcoin completely is just not possible, because it's just it's too all encompassing, and you would have to understand economics completely. You would have to understand computer science completely, and cryptography completely, and game theory, and so many other things. And it's also what I believe that Bitcoin is also its own thing. Like it's a combination of all those disciplines, but it's also it's a new alien technology, and everyone is trying to understand it. And since it's so new, I don't think that you can have a full understanding. And what you said, that's exactly how it felt to me. Like in the Buddhist way of things, I felt like I achieved enlightenment, and that's oh my, I hate myself for saying that, but I have no other language to use. And in a way, I just realized that it doesn't fucking matter. Like Bitcoin already won, and I achieved full Bitcoin Zen. I just, I realized that it doesn't matter what we do. It doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter what anyone does. Bitcoin already won, and I believe that we are 50% there in speaking in time terms. I think it will just take another 10 years. And Bitcoin is so economically powerful and such a powerful idea, and it's so technical powerful, and it has such neat side effects that everything will work itself out in the next 10 years or so. And if it's 20 years, I don't care. Like it's the same order of magnitude. It won't take 100 years. It will take 10 more years. I always repeat that in the next 9 years, we will have 3 halvings. We only had 2 yet. Like Bitcoin is still so small. It's so small. If anyone is listening to that and it's like 2019, 2020, you're still so early. You have no idea. And it's just a metamorphosis. And that's also what I realized, that it's an unstoppable force. It's an unstoppable idea. And it's a force of nature. And we're now at a stage where I think it can't be stopped anymore. I tried really hard to work through this, how to stop Bitcoin. And I wrote a very lengthy article on it. And then I deleted everything. And I just said, you don't kill Bitcoin. So the article was called How to Kill Bitcoin. And the content of the article is just, you don't. And I think that, to come back to what I said at the very, very beginning, it's like a process. It's like a natural process. It's just like a caterpillar transforms into a butterfly. We're not at the butterfly stage yet, but we are like halfway in the caterpillar stage. And we have our nice cocoon, and just people are working on Bitcoin. People are quitting their jobs to work on Bitcoin for free. We have a lot of companies that hire core developers. We have a lot of companies that really believe in this idea. The companies are all over the world. The people are all over the world. I don't think it can be stopped. And I think that the governments and the current powers that be are way too comfortable and too much, like they're asleep basically. And Bitcoin will, it will conquer this world by storm.
Well, I think you talked about the fact that you won't ever understand Bitcoin. I think that this is a parallel to the Christian concept of the imitation of Christ, right? Where you model your life after the imitation of Christ, which is, God on earth, where you, while recognizing that you can't achieve it, the point of doing so is to continually work yourself towards a better perfect understanding, right? So in the understanding of Bitcoin, whereas you probably won't ever achieve that goal of totally understanding it, as it continues to evolve in ways that we don't yet realize or totally grasp. The constant working your way through those circles is a way of achieving a better knowledge of it, and thus having a better understanding of it to move forward. But with, to go back to the discussion of religion, so you talked about in the echo chamber how within 1 to 2 years you said that you see it as kind of emerging into more mainstream, whether it's mainstream public or just mainstream Bitcoiners, as that. Where do you see it, how it exists today, and then how do you see it kind of going forward in the future, in whatever, whether you want to go 1 or 2 years or 10 years or 100 years into the future?
I think obviously currently Bitcoin has cult status. Like all the maximalists are part of a cult, and everyone is saying it tongue in cheek, but it's obviously true. I mean, again, we have carnivore dinners. We have people that are on a steak only diet. We have people that are not willing to speak the names of other shitcoins, like don't even it's like, have you heard of Ripple? And then it's like, what Ripple? No, never heard of it. And like people self-identify as maximalists, and people self-identify as toxic maximalists, and all of it is a kind of a joke and tongue-in-cheek, but at the same time it's not. The people, they obviously go to those gatherings and they have this carnivore dinners, and it's a lot of camaraderie and it's a lot of cultish behavior. But I'm not using this term. I'm using this term technically, not in a derogatory sense. So I'm part of this cult as well, obviously. And I think the first people are starting to take this even more seriously, and that's, I think, where we get religious tendencies. But again, take everything I say with a grain of salt. I don't mean that people will build churches for Satoshi and go into these churches in the next 1 or 2 years or something like that. Not at all. I just mean it in a way that Bitcoin is such an important part of your life that you are being religious about it. That's how I mean it. And we have people that do the same thing for the first 3 Star Wars movies, for example. It's such an important part of your life that you're just being religious about it, and you watch it for example, once a month or something like that. And if someone else makes a joke about it, he will not be your friend anymore. And that's how I see it developing. And everything after that, we will see. I mean, I think there are a handful of people, probably hundreds of people worldwide, that are already very religious about it. Like, they religiously stack sats. They sacrifice a lot of their life to just get their hands on as much Bitcoin as they can. And it's not only with stacking sats, it's like you said as well, it's in terms of trying to understand it as deeply as you can. I mean, I sacrificed all of my old life in a way to study Bitcoin full time, and I'm still doing that. So I sacrifice a lot to be able to do what I'm doing now. And I think there are a lot of people like me that are just so obsessed by it. And I don't mean obsessed in a bad way. It's just like it doesn't make sense to do anything else, because your whole mind and your whole soul is in this thing anyway, so you might as well try to give it your best shot. And yeah, that's very close to a religious devotion, I would say. So that's how I see it.
Well, given that Bitcoin lives in the digital space, it does not live in the physical space. I don't think that it will ever, or I shouldn't say it will ever, it won't ever, but that the idea that this would, if you talk about a Bitcoin religion in these terms, that it would be somehow building its own buildings. I think that it will be seen in the future as the first online digital religion, in a way, that it will live totally within the digital space, as we are moving more and more towards a digital future where we spend less time in the meat space and more time in the digital space. And it wouldn't make sense to me, other than just for mere tradition, because people still have a lot of ties, and rightly so, to the physical space, right? Where it will present itself at times in that. I mean, we kind of see that in a way where early Christians would gather within the Roman Empire. They would go, into catacombs or into small homes, and they would meet and they would talk about their faith and practice their rituals there in small groups. And we kind of see that within Bitcoin meetups already, where it's kind of these small groups of the faithful, if you want to call them that, and new converts, meeting and talking about it, becoming kind of getting a base understanding of it. Whereas as they move on, they work on their own and kind of study on their own to get a better understanding of it. But it'll be 100%, or I should say like 98% digital versus physical.
Yeah, I think that's true, but I also think that it's important to meet in the physical space, because just the bandwidth is so much larger. Like if you talk to a person face to face in the real world, it conveys just for example, conveying the level of conviction on Twitter is really hard. But if you meet someone else in real life at a meetup or at a conference, it you immediately click with those people that have the same level of conviction as you are. It doesn't matter if it's high or low. It's kind of like it's weird how this works. And so I think that physical spaces are important. And I'm not sure if I 100% understand what you mean when you say that Bitcoin is purely digital, and I agree. Of course, I think again it's just an idea, and it's the current incarnation of this idea is with the current software on the current pipes that make up the internet. But it's also it can be physical in a way. I mean, for example, your private key can be a physical thing, and we have hardware wallets and open dimes and paper wallets and stuff like that. And in a way, it's also not obvious to me that Bitcoin is purely like Bitcoin obviously needs the physical world to function. And I'm saying that because when I went through the mind exercise of how to kill Bitcoin, you could try to attack the physical infrastructure of the internet and do segregated internets, like you can cut the undersea cables and stuff like that. So in a way, Bitcoin is this weird organism which lives partly in the informational realm, but also partly on hard drives and fiber optic cables and other stuff in the physical realm. So it's not that clear cut to me, but I get exactly what you mean. And in a way, we had these purely digital things before that, for example, in Second Life and in other online games and other online communities where you have worldwide communities, and it's not obvious that those kind of communities exist because there are no huge gatherings and there are not huge buildings where people meet up. But those are millions of people that share the same interests and share the same worldview in a way. And if they meet up, they are a force to be reckoned with. And I think we can see that with online gaming, and we can see that with esports, for example. Suddenly there are stadiums with 30,000 people, 50,000 people, and they're fully booked, and there are like 30,000 people watching a Counter-Strike tournament. And I know that because I'm part of that group as well. Like I've been in those kind of stadiums, and it's a force to be reckoned with if you meet people in the real world and you realize that there are many of you. I think we will have the same thing happen in Bitcoin in the next couple of years.
Yeah. Well, more what I was getting at was just as we move forward in the future, but the experience that you get, especially in large crowds, because that just kind of plays into the crowd and mob mentality, and not a bad way, but in a good way, where you have these common experiences that you can't quite get where if you go just to stay on our theme, if you go to a religious festival, regardless of what it is, whether it's the Hajj, or going to a large mass in Catholicism, or going to a Buddhist monastery where there's a large amount of monks all praying, where you participate in this common experience, it's much more powerful than either just watching the video or just reading about it. And reading, like, you can go and you can read religious experiences of mystics throughout history, but it's not the same thing as experiencing it yourself and kind of being in that physical location. And we have a long way to go before technology can catch up with reality, or the physical reality of recreating those experiences. But you mentioned private keys, and this was the last topic I wanted to kind of go over, was because it's something that I've talked about on other episodes, and you've talked about, and Max Hillebrand as well, is that this concept of ownership in Bitcoin. And I think that within the circles of understanding, I think as you move more and more through those circles, time and gain more understanding, is this idea that you don't own Bitcoin. And episode 54 that I just did with Stefan Kinsella, who's I don't know if you're familiar with him, who's
I know him, yeah,
and he is coming from it from kind of more of an anti-IP stance, and his his coming to this realization is different. It comes from a different avenue
Yeah.
than what we're talking about, but Max Hilbrand described it as you occult the knowledge of Bitcoin, and in a way, Stefan also talks about it, but from more of a legalistic term, in that you can't own a
Hmm.
number. You can't own,
Yeah.
and he talks about almost, Bitcoin as being an idea, and
Yeah.
in a way where you can't own an idea, and
Yeah.
should never be able to own an idea, because it's just really gross in terms of where, well, what are you going to do? Sue everybody that has this idea later or thinks about that idea. But I
Yeah.
think that it's the best way of understanding Bitcoin as not merely a good, like gold or wheat or something like that, a
Hmm.
commodity good, but as purely an idea and as pure mathematics. You also, even within IP, you can't own a mathematical formula. You can't copyright pi
Yeah.
as it
Exactly.
exists in the universe, and you can't just own a piece of the foundation of the universe.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is like, that loops perfectly back to my insight as well. It's again, I know I repeat myself, but the main insight for me was that Bitcoin first and foremost is an idea, and all parts of it are an idea, and it's an infectious, very powerful idea. And the fact that private keys are just numbers and in a way are also just an idea is part of that. And but the whole system, like Budion wrote a very good piece, why America can't regulate Bitcoin, and it talks about that extensively. That the whole system is just speech. All of it is just speech. Like, it's a protocol, and you can, if you want to, you can do Bitcoin on paper perfectly well. It just takes a long time, but all of it is on the idea level. All of it is speech, and that's why America can't really outlaw it and can't really ban it, because same as with the crypto wars. And the fact, I think it's so funny, and I said it a couple of times already, but it's I think it's just hilarious that you cannot, with this in mind, you cannot possess Bitcoin, but Bitcoin can possess you. And I think I just find this endlessly funny, because obviously we all possess Bitcoin in a way, but all we are doing is we are protecting this idea, which is our private key. We're protecting this information. And that's also why Bitcoin is so insanely powerful, because you can, like, your private key, the number that is stored on there, it can take many forms. It's just information, and you can express this information in so many different forms. You can store it on a chip in a hardware wallet, and only you, then it kind of becomes something that you can possess. Like, technically, in a way, you possess the hardware wallet, and no one else, not even you, knows the magic number. Only the hardware wallet knows the number. And so you can kind of possess the thing, and so we go back to physical security and stuff that we're very familiar with. But you could also create a brain wallet, of course, and just the information that is so important, that is your private key, you just store it in your head. And most people currently store their seed phrases just on pieces of paper and throw it somewhere, I guess, in the sock drawer. And I just think that it's a profound insight once you realize that. Like, I think understanding Bitcoin, you have multiple of these profound insights, and the fact that your private key is just information is one of them. And I agree with Stefan Kinsella that all of this, it's a hairy topic, and it's problematic in the legal sense. And he wrote a grand book against intellectual copyright. I think that's the title. And it's basically, we run into the same problems that you have if you want to copyright mathematics, or if you want to copyright code. Like, from a legal perspective, code is on the level of ideas, and mathematics as well, and you can't really copyright a formula. You get into a very weird territory, because there are mathematical constructs that you can use to transmute a formula into just numbers in a way, and then you suddenly copyright numbers. And who should have the right to copyright a number? You know what I mean? It's we have similar problems like that in Bitcoin, and I think it's really interesting, and it's really funny.
Well, you kind of wrap this into your realization as well, is that I think that while this is I don't know if you ever heard of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, where the
I don't think I have, no.
yeah, it was if you ever seen the movie Arrival. I don't know if you've
Oh
seen.
yeah, I have. Yeah.
So in that movie, it's kind of what led me down that rabbit hole of kind of looking at this. And while it's not without its own criticisms and controversies, it's a hypothesis. So obviously, it's not accepted
What's
as
the name again?
fact.
I didn't get it the first time.
Sapir-Whorf,
Okay.
Sapirwhorf, and
Okay.
their hypothesis was that the structure of language and the way that language is created and the kind of culture behind it affects well, it also affects the culture, but it affects the person who speaks it, their cognition, the ability that they see the world and kind of understand
Hmm.
it, and your perception of the world is kind of it's through the lens of your spoken language, because there's different if you look at the differences between, like, Chinese and English, or German and English, that I think especially in English is my experience through trying to learn other languages, is that I think as we've come farther into the future, we've kind of almost the incentive for language is to become more efficient, right? So we have less words to describe things, and we just have fewer words to kind of we have fewer words, and each word kind of starts to encapsulate larger and larger experiences and descriptions of things, which I think is
Hmm.
good for even online language, right? You have these very shorthand things where
Hmm.
if you look back, I remember looking back at like old English words, and I know that there's a lot of words in German that have these very, very specific things that they are describes
Yeah.
nothing else. And I think that that's it's sad in a way, because we kind of lose our ability to have a very definitive and very specific description of an experience or an item or a thing that
Hmm.
happened or whatever it may be, just because we may call just everything is cool or everything is bad or that's great,
Yeah.
versus this specific word that describes a very specific experience or thing that happened. And I wonder
Hmm.
if, as we move forward and we all start to fall into the Bitcoin world view and use the language of Bitcoin, whether it's the colloquial language that we speak on Twitter, or it's the as people start to maybe get more into understanding the code of it, that might prove out to be true, that this hypothesis might help us to change our perception of the world merely because we are adopting a brand new language.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're just missing the not only the language but also in a way the metaphors for Bitcoin and something to compare it to. I think we don't have anything really to compare it to, and I think again biology kind of works. And on the level of analysis of people, I think Bitcoin kind of works. And I think maybe a good way to tie it together and maybe to end on is there's this quote from Snow Crash. I just started reading it. Brandon Quittem recommended it to me. It's a science fiction novel, and I think the quote goes something like this: "It's what is this Snow Crash thing? Is it a virus? Is it a religion? Is it a computer code?" And in the same way, Bitcoin is all of that, and I think maybe even more.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to end the episode. I'd really like to thank you for taking time out of your morning to come on and discuss this, and I look forward to in the future that we have continued conversations on as you kind of come to understand this experience of even at a
Yeah.
deeper level.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for providing a platform where I can think out loud.
And where can people follow you, find you, read what you're up to?
Oh yeah, I'm there Gigi on Twitter, DERGIGI, and I also post everything that I post on Medium on theirgg.com. And as you said in the beginning, I also have 21lessons.com. And by the way, there will be a book out soon. So I
Oh,
will
great.
put 21 lessons into a book. And I also curate bitcoinresources.com. And I want to move Bitcoin resources into the open source and community domain. So it's already open source on GitHub, and I will start looking for collaborators very soon. So if you're interested in doing that, please reach out to me. I'm very easy to reach. My DMs are open, and my contact details are on theirgg.com as well.
And I will have links to all the things that we talked about, articles and websites, and everything that we talked about. And once again, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Dustin.